sure that I'm doing it fairly smooth as I move out and across my face, and knowing that my hair will end up darker than that in the first place. You know, I have that opportunity. So I'm connecting the shadows of my nose with the shadows of my eyes, and just putting that same like light loading value across this whole nose section into the cheeks, my cheeks. So I'm just gonna shade this whole next section of my face. I'm not gonna go necessarily over, but I am going to go under. Okay. So I don't know if you can even see that. It hardly looks like I've done anything, but I have a really light layer of pencil everywhere. And the way I get my pencil to be this light, again, it looks holding it and shading, but really my pencil, do you see how loose it is? I'm just holding it and I'm just sliding the pencil itself back and forth. So my hand is actually sitting on the table and I'm just making the pencil itself, as light as this pencil will draw. It's only the weight of the pencil itself that's pushing onto the paper, which isn't very much, right? Pencils aren't super heavy. But this way I have light value that goes all the way across. Now I'm going to, just like when I worked in my eyes, I always find it a little bit easier to identify some of my darks first. So in my nose, my darkest area is this up underneath the shadow from, you know, the hole, your nostril, making sure that I'm looking at the shape that shadow is on both sides, because it's different on both sides. And it's really only a dark shadow at the very, very top, and lighter as it comes out from underneath there. And again, I'm going to make sure that I'm looking at my photo as much as possible and sort of adjusting. And it will look weird at first. Like, do that, it looks a little wonky, right? The next thing is here, this like bottom ball section of my nose. Remember when we talked about noses, when we were learning to draw noses, we talked about them like they were a series of shapes, right? So at the bottom of this is the tip of my nose, my nostrils that goes up to between our eyeballs, okay? So when we shade nostril area underneath, and then we have the idea that all three of these are spheres. So that's the part that I'm starting to shade now. And I want to make sure that I'm looking really carefully at my portrait because photo. So just like when I was working with my eyes, I'm kind of holding my finger in the place that I'm working on my portrait photo, because it helps me kind of remember that, and I'm watching for those shadows. Now I've outlined a couple of these darker shadows on my drawing. That's part of my contour line drawing here, was where this odd kind of darker shadow is, tan side of my nose. So again, I like to work from dark to light. There's a little bit more of a shadow underneath here as well, and this one starts to go out into the roundness of my cheek, okay? Also drew that one with the grid. So if you didn't identify any of those shadows, with why we don't take the grid off, it's part of why we leave it there. Like if I need to go back and say, oh, how far out does that shadow go? I can see how it itself. So I have sort of a square section there. And you'll see now as I work my way up, again, I'm holding my finger on my portrait. This is the darker side of my face, the left-hand side. So this is where most of my shadows are on my nose. This one is the darker one. I have a couple of lighter sections here. That needs to be darker. If at any point too, I make something too dark, I decide, oh, there's kind of a highlight there on my nose. That's where your needle eraser comes in handy again. I can take this and I can say, oh, this got too dark, and I can just push that straight down and I can lighten that up again. So you see how easy that was to kind of lighten that up with that kneadable eraser. Like I said, from here, I find it's always super best. I just have holding my finger kind of where my place is in my drawing. All right, I lost my nice, there we go. So I'm going to work my way out a little bit. I'm going to work on those cheek shadows too, just so it looks, so I'm integrating some of the shadows into the other areas of my face. All right, something is, oh, this doesn't come far enough over. Like something is funky. Now these shadows are a little harder because they're lighter. This side of my face doesn't have as much contrast. It's a little lighter. I have this that is darker here. Work on it. And then we do also have this darker underneath and into our lip area. This whole side of my face is a little darker. You see, as I go back and darken in other areas, I have to go back and deepen my shadows. It becomes a layering process working on your portrait, that as you darken some areas, you have to go back and re-darken areas that you thought you might be done with. And then it's just, like I said, looking to see where those shadows need to be darker again, where they need to be lighter, and working my way out. You'll also notice that I have a really hard time, if I'm gonna do a really good job with my drawing, I have a really hard time talking while I do it. The words kind of go away. So the one thing I'm noticing right now is I outlined this area here for this odd little shadow that's on that right hand side of my nose, but I outlined it when I drew the contour line drawing, the contour line drawing is too dark. I need those contour edges to go away into my shading. So in order to fix that, I'm going to have to, I end up getting rid of the shadow that I put in there, but I'm going to use my eraser to lighten up that whole like little like U shape that I put in there. And now I can come back and I can reshade that, and you'll see I don't see the outline that I had there is gone now, okay? And then if I get that a little too dark, and lighten that back up. From your nose, you can shade all the way out across into your hair. Just like with my eyes, I will find it useful sometimes to darken that edge of my hair as I go. I certainly don't have to. I like it for the contrast, just so I can kind of feel that border that I'm working with. And then I'm looking, cheek is much darker than your hair. Sometimes the side of your cheek is about the same as your hair. So here on this section of my face, there's not much difference between the edge of my hair and the shadow that's here on my cheek. I then also know that I didn't quite get this guy underneath my eye quite dark enough, so I can go back shadow as I'm working. And then here I see that this is the border. This is the edge of that darker shadow that leads right up underneath my lip. And now this guy needs to be darker again. So it's kind of a process, and I'm looking back and forth now to sort of identify. I've come down a little bit more shadow there to kind of darken that up. And I'm just gonna keep working, okay? Anybody have any questions about noses? No? All right, so that's your goal. If you didn't finish your eyes on Friday, it's to work so that this whole section of your portrait, you've done your eyes and your nose and most of the shadows that go out of face. If you're stuck, let me know. Otherwise, I will let you work. If anybody still is missing work, you can get that into me. Otherwise, yeah, that's it.